Hey everyone, Salena here, Salena Baca Crochet. Let's mingle on this Monday. If you're watching live, come on over, say hey, say hello, tell me where you're viewing from. If you're watching on the replay, it's still the same great jam. Just come on over, pretend like you're following live. I can still see all of your questions, comments, feedback, all of that. We'll make it fun, all right? So I haven't done one of these in a while, but I really love doing them. I call it Ask Me Anything. I get really good questions from you guys in the community, and sometimes I'll just kind of type out an answer. But every now and then I get one that's so good that I want to have an entire conversation around it. So that's what I'm going to do here today. And the question the question here today is from Lisa, and Lisa posted this in my community. Link to my community is down in the video description, so go ahead and check that out after this live. Come on over and join if you're not there, or if you're in and you just don't get notifications, make sure you turn those notifications on. Anyway, the link is there. So I'm going to approve this, and I'm going to post this for Lisa and for everyone else because I think it's fantastic. So thanks for asking, Lisa. Okay. Lisa says, Salena, I'm curious. When you purchase yarn, like what you showed us live the other day, do you have a project in mind when you're purchasing it, or do you purchase colors you like, then decide what you're going to create with it? I love this question because there isn't a small answer. There's a lot of different answers. And so again, that's why I think it's such a great question that I wanted to have an entire conversation about it. Good one, Lisa. Love it. Okay. So I do a little bit of everything. It really just kind of depends. So I'm going to answer first by giving an answer for the last project that I shared and the current project that I'm working for, because those are one and the same. So the other day I had a unboxing. I got a box of yarn from Lion Brand, and I, opened up the box and I showed you all the yarn that I had, right? And I told you guys that it was all very specifically for a project. Now I wanted to show you a little bit of my process for how I choose yarns for a project. But I can't show you what I'm currently working on because it's still like sneaky secret. So I can't show you that, but I will show you something from a project that I already did in the past. And I'm going to use that as an example to show you how I chose yarn for it. Okay. So, the process that I'm going to show you here is I'm working on something. I already know the theme or the project. I know what I want to accomplish, right? So for example, recently I was in the mood for home decor. So I knew that I wanted to make home decor and, things that you put in your house, things that you can decorate in your house, or, things that are functional. So just home, I started there. Now, as a person who crochets and writes patterns and things like that, I started with that theme, which is still, huge in itself. And what I did was I looked in the crochet world. What are people making? What kind of things are people making for the home? Of course, they're making blankets. They're making, wall hangings. They're making baskets. They're making pillows. So, those are some of the kind of obvious ones. So I looked in the crochet world, but then I also looked outside of the crochet world. I went to Pinterest and I looked up things like table setting. And that's where I found this picture. So this picture is not crochet at all. But I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the colors. I love the image. I love the shape. And so this inspired me to say, all right, I want to make some table settings. And this is just my inspiration. Now, for me, inspiration can mean lots of different things. It doesn't mean I'm going to copy this exactly. It's not like a copycat kind of thing, but it's like, oh, okay, I'm inspired to make a rectangular shaped placemat, and I want it to fit this exact. So I want to see a plate that's about this size, and I want the silverware to fit nicely on either side. I want there to be some space on either side. So I think I might have seen a few rectangular shaped or oblong shaped placemats. And I like shapes like this. I like rectangles. So I was like, all right, that's my inspiration. Let's go from there. So after I found this image, I liked these colors, but you can't always find the exact colors that you're looking for. If I found this color exactly, it's not all one color. Man, let me make this a little bigger. You see how it's not all one color? You see that there's this very slight variation in color. From far away, it looks like it's all tan. But very close up, I see a little bit of blue. I see a little bit of gray. So I kind of see a lot going on there. I could not find a yarn that looked like that. So sometimes I look for color. Do I want to create that color? And sometimes I look for like a fiber or a texture or something like that. Now for this particular project, it has to function in a certain way. This is a table setting. That means it's going on a table. That means it's going to be around food, high traffic areas. So I want it to be durable. And if you need to throw this thing in the washer and the dryer or just kind of spot clean it, I want it to hold up over time. I didn't want to use something that looked, how do I say, like yarn. That is what I want to say, but I want to say it differently. I wanted to use a material. I wanted it to look like something you'd get from a boutique. I wanted you to make this, and I want people to go, where did you buy this from? Where did you get it from? Right? So I was looking for a color, but I was specifically looking to create a particular kind of fabric with yarn that looked unique and different and interesting. So that was the rabbit hole that I went down with this. So I just started looking for yarns. What yarns are available? What yarns are new or different or interesting? For me, I write patterns, so I want to find and use yarns that people will also be able to find, like maybe in the places where they shop for yarn. So I think about what's available at Michael's and Joann's. You know, what are the big box store yarn companies or big box store yarns that people can go and find locally, or what are some yarns that people can even get online? So I think about things like that. So that's where I narrowed down to a few choices from Lion Brand. And, I'm using a Google Doc here. This is literally, there's lots of other projects here. I'm not going to show you all of them. I just wanted to show you this one in particular. But I just kind of take images and I put them as kind of like a vision board, a dream board. So it started out by, this is my inspiration. What yarns do I think are going to work well, including the colors? So I narrowed it down to Rewind, which wound up being the yarn that I chose for this. And I chose 2 different colors based on the yarn colors that were available, because they didn't have anything that looked like this. So I was thinking about things that I wanted in my space, and I thought, okay, black and white. That's my realm. Everything kind of goes with black and white in my space. So I'll start there. But I also found this yarn, Lazy Days. Now, I liked the texture of these yarns. I liked that of course they're yarn, but they look different. They look unique. They look interesting. So for this project, I was like, all right, let me get these and I'll kind of play with them and see how they work up. Now, that was the conclusion that I came to. I obviously went with Rewind. This particular pattern has worked with Rewind. Love the way that it worked up. But you may be going, well, how do you even decide on those? Like, how can you just look at yarns online and decide which ones to go with? Well, that's where I'm going to share this next little tip with you. But before I dive into that, I see that a lot of you guys are here. So I'm going to say hello to Angelica. Good morning to you. Kathy is here. Hello. Linda Woodthorpe, one of my favorite crocheters of all time, is here watching. So good to see you. Angelica says, I have a question too. I'm going to answer that at the end because that is going to be a different thing. So I'll get to you towards the end on that. Margaret, hey, so good to see you. Margaret says double or triple it up. Yeah, sometimes that can work. Sometimes you can do that for some patterns to kind of get the fabric that you're looking for. I hear you. I smell what you're stepping in. I like where you're going with that. Okay. So I have used all 3 of these yarns in the past, so I was already familiar with how they worked up. But in the case where maybe you find a yarn and you're not sure how it's going to work and you're like, is this going to do what I want it to do, right? So there's some tricks that I use to research a yarn, to look into a yarn, to see if it's going to do what you need it to do. So my favorite thing to do is to go to, wait a minute. Okay, that's rewind. This is rewind. Is it? Where? Rewind. Okay, hold on. Let's rewind that. Let's rewind one more time. Okay, there we go. So I like to go to Ravelry first because it's in addition to it being a pattern database, it's also a yarn database, and there's extensive information here on each yarn. So to give you an example, I went to Ravelry, I went to the yarn tab, I typed in rewind, I found rewind by Lion Brand right here, and it gives me all the stats. So it tells me the weight, the yardage, let me see, the hook size. It tells me what fibers are in it. That's important because, some fibers are better suited for certain things and some are not at all going to be good for certain things. For example, if I'm going to make a crochet summer tank top, I probably am not going to use, I'm not picking on anybody. I'm probably not going to use like Red Heart Super Saver. That's not going to be my go-to, not only based on the fiber, but based on the texture and the feel and all of that. So I wanted to use like a really basic example. Hopefully that paints a picture. Okay, so for Rewind, I was able to look at all of these stats here. So also the texture. What is the texture of the yarn? This is a tape yarn. Okay, that's some of that different, new, interesting. It's not round yarn. It's flat. So that's going to give me some more of that boutique, look that I'm going for. But another thing that I love about this is that you can view different projects that are linked to this yarn. And that's what this is right here. So here are all of the projects that people made with Lion Brand Rewind, and they linked to this yarn. So now I get to see what people are making with this yarn and how it works up. So this really helps me also because I can see, all right, there's a couple hundred projects posted here. 30 projects are clothing, 730 are accessories, so bags, hats, things like that. 42 of them are home decor. So not a whole lot of people were using this for home decor, but I found that it was probably going to be really interesting and an excellent use of yarn for the project that I was looking for, simply because so many people made bags and hats with this yarn. And in my opinion, a bag and a hat, that's got to have some function, right? You're using it a lot. So that tells me that not only is it going to be a beautiful yarn, it's going to be a functional yarn. So for that reason, I felt very confident that this was going to make a very durable place setting yarn. So that was how I concluded that there. And just having this information here for just the yarn details and what people were making with it, even if I'd never seen this yarn in person, I felt like this was going to be a really good yarn to test out for what I wanted to do with it. Okay, so let's do the same thing with Lion Brand Lazy Days. Now this, again, I've seen it in person. I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. But this is giving me all those same details. So the yarn weight, the yardage, the hook size, the fibers, also the texture. Here, the texture was chainette. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, or you're unsure, yarn, whenever it's created, sometimes it's twisted together. So you can see all the individual threads, and they twist together, and to where you can literally drive yarn up here. I'd have to look. I do, but I don't want to dig through it. Look at the end of your yarn, and you can kind of pull apart those different threads. So that has been twisted together, right? So a chainette means when you look at the individual yarn, it looks like it's been machine knitted together. It is woven together in a way that makes it even more durable, and it doesn't really fray apart as easily. So it is a very durable construction, and it really does an excellent job of making every stitch look that much more individual and make it pop. So that told me, okay, chainette, I like it. I like where that's going. Not a whole lot of projects are listed here on Ravelry, only 75. So that's not a whole lot to pull from. And when I came over here to look at all of those 75 projects, I saw that 14 of them were clothing, 25 were accessories, and it's all over the board. It's headwear, things for the neck and torso, hats, things for hands, things for feet, bags. There is some home decor here, so that's kind of a contender. It takes third place over behind accessories. Oh, no, it takes second place. I can't math. Just behind accessories, and then home, and then clothing is next after that. So here we can see all of those different accessories that have been knitted or crocheted. More people have crocheted with this than knitted, or more people have posted projects for them. So we can see all those different examples. Here's my example right here. I made a bag with it. Loved it. So anyway, this will really help you to see, like, what are people making with this? How does that fabric look? What do I think it's capable of? So seeing all of these, again, there are lots of accessories for this. That made me feel pretty confident that, yeah, I'm going to use something. I want to make something for the home, but, in terms of things that people are making for it, I think that it's going to be beautiful, and I think it's going to be durable. So that really helped me further narrow down that was going to be a great yarn for my project. So after that, yeah, I placed an order for the yarn. I got it in hand. I knew what I wanted to make. I knew what shape. I knew what size. So from there, it was just a matter of kind of playing with each one of those yarns and making some swatches to see how I liked them. And in my own personal opinion, Lazy Days was, it was going to be a little too loopy. It wasn't going to be as dense as I wanted it to be. When I say loopy, it was going to have, it had too nice of a drape, in my opinion, for something like this. I wanted something to be a little sturdier, a little heftier. So Lazy Days did not make the cut for this for that reason, and that's why Rewind, the tape yarn, did, as we see here. So that's it. That was a really long answer for this particular question right here. And that was when I had a very specific project in mind. I knew exactly what I wanted to make, and that's what I did. But for, let's kind of break that down in a few different other scenarios. Now, let's say you found this pattern and that's the pattern that you want to make. My suggestion is, if you find a picture of something that you love and you want to replicate it, you might want to start with the yarn that the pattern calls for. If you want to replicate that exact same thing, that exact same look and feel and style and all of that. And if you either can't use that yarn or you want to venture out, look for something that's going to be a really good substitute and look at those different things that I was looking at. What's the fiber? What's the texture? What's the gauge? What's the size? Because that way, even if you don't have a yarn in hand, you're going to have enough details to help you narrow down the best searches possible. Now, sometimes, I think we all do this. We find a yarn and we just love it. And we're like, I love that yarn and I just have to make something with that yarn. I mean, heck, I just did that. Here, I'll show you guys what I got this weekend. I got this yarn this weekend because it was my local yarn. It was local yarn sale day. So I had to go to my local yarn sale it was the local yarn shop day. Oh my gosh. So I had to go support my local yarn shop and I went and I got this yarn because I want it, because it's beautiful. So let's use this as an example. How do you determine what you're going to, how do you decide what to make with it? Same exact thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in this yarn into Ravelry and I'm going to pull up this stat sheet and I'm going to see what people are making with it. I've got the yarn label right here, so I have it in hand. So I already know what the yardage is. I know what the fiber content is. I have all the stats, but what are other people making with this? And that'll help me to maybe decide, are there a few tank tops? Are there wraps? Is there a poncho? What am I going to do with this? So that'll help me decide. Oh, all right. So on this subject, I'd love to hear if you guys have any questions, comments, feedback, more on this. And it looks like Maribel is here. So good to see you. Maribel says, very pretty. Kathy, the way you're using Ravelry Yarn Project Search will be so useful when I'm deciding suitable substitutions. Game changer. Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's all about just understanding what a pattern calls for. And depending on what you're making, it's good, that may mean different things. If you're making a blanket, what's that blanket supposed to be? Is it, what's the yarn weight? What's the fiber content? If the blanket is made with 100% wool and you're like, I'd rather make that in acrylic, that's a reasonable substitute. If you're making a tank top or a sweater or something, that fiber content is going to matter more so. With an Afghan, it may not matter as much. It's all about what your comfort level is, size and gauge. You can be a little flexible, but if you're making something size, like something that you're going to wear, like a top, that's where, the fiber content is going to matter more, but also the gauge and size is going to matter more. So not only using a resource like yarnsub.com to find substitutes for a particular yarn, but coming on over here to Ravelry and seeing what the possibilities and the potential are for a particular yarn, that's going to help you decide as well. Maribel, so Lazy Days is probably better for wearables. Based on, now let's go back to what people have done with it on Ravelry. So what people have done with this so far, it can mean a few different things. So again, we did not see a lot of projects posted for this yarn. This yarn is fairly new, and it may be discontinued in a year or so. I don't know. We don't know if this is going to have any sort of longevity. So far we only see 75 projects listed that were directly linked to this yarn. So we don't have a whole lot of examples. Now the interesting thing about brand new yarns is that you may not have a lot of projects to pull from it. In contrast, I mentioned Red Heart Super Saver. There are probably 15,000 projects listed on Ravelry for Red Heart Super Saver for everything. And I would imagine that you're going to see Red Heart Super Saver project. You're going to see a wide variety of things in every single category. My guess is that you're going to see more for Red Heart Super Saver in accessories, home, toys, and hobbies. I think it's going to be in that region first. You're going to see the majority of it there. Because ultimately, whatever you make, you're the master of your own design. It's whatever you think looks best, whatever you think feels best. So really, you can make those decisions for yourself. There are very few wrong answers when it comes to what yarn you're using. In those respects, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. That's what I think. So let's say there is a brand new yarn, right? And there aren't a lot of projects. So you're having to decide a few things. And so if you do see a new yarn, you're like, I found this yarn, I love it, I think it has a lot of potential, but there aren't a lot of projects. How do I decide what I could do with it? That's where you can go to places like yarnsub.com, see what it's comparable to, because that's where you can pull from, okay, I think this is comparable to another yarn, and that yarn has been around for a while, and there are projects for that. So that's where I can kind of piece these puzzle pieces together, right? Or you can also look at these stats and go, okay, it is an Aran weight yarn. What other things can kind of fit in that category? What's the fiber content? And then you can kind of go based on the fiber and the size to narrow down what it can be best suited for. So just looking at these stats and, not feeling it in person, it may be kind of hard to go, what can I do with this? What is this going to be best used for? But using those stats can really help you narrow it down. And then, absolutely. When you have a yarn in hand, when you're feeling that yarn, that can also help you further determine, like, what can I do with this? What is its potential? So Maribel says, good tips. I'm so glad you think so. Maribel says the yarn is pretty. Angela, he is here. Good to see you. And Bobby is here too. Hey, good to see you. Okay, guys, so that was all I wanted to share with you today on how I choose yarn and how I narrow down the characteristics of a yarn to decide what it can be best suited for. Now, I feel that what I do with yarn is probably going to be more complicated than what the people who love yarn, people who just crochet because they love yarn and are happy. What I do is probably going to be far more involved and far more complicated. But if you're just following patterns, or, you already have most of the information that you need to not only choose fiber, but to substitute fiber, right? To substitute that yarn. Or, if you just find a yarn and you're like, I don't know what to do with this, this is a really great way to determine, like, hey, lazy days. I found it in my yarn shop and I got 10 skeins. What can I do with it? This is an excellent way for you to narrow down, what you can do with it. All right, guys, so that's all I had on this subject today. Again, if you're watching on the replay and you guys have any other questions on this subject, let me know. But I found this to be really fascinating and I really wanted to share my process with you. So hopefully it helped. Let me know if you still have questions about it. Okay, now this is a side question from Angelica. So I think we're switching gears here since this is an Ask Me Anything type thing. Angelica says, I have a question too. How do you adjust when you love a pattern, but let's say the pattern calls for a weight 3 and you have a fingering yarn? How do you adjust it so it still fits and looks like it should? It really kind of depends, and there are a lot of things you have to think about whenever you want to substitute yarn. So first and foremost, you see a pattern and you love it. Here, let's, any example, right? Or here, let's do this. Okay. So it depends on what category the pattern falls into. So you find a pattern, you like the pattern because you saw a picture of it. That's how we fall into, seeing things that we like and wanting to make, right? You found a picture of it. What is that thing? Is it clothing, an accessory? Is it for the home? Is it a toy? Is it a toy? Is it for the pet? What is the item, right? Because depending on what the item is, it has to function in a certain way. Some things, size and gauge and feel is going to matter. A few examples here. If you are making this hat, you found this picture and you're like, oh, you guys can't see it. Hold on. Your face is in the way. Let's put you over here. Here, you found this hat on the internet and you're like, I love this hat. I want to make this hat. Well, this hat was made with Lion Brand Rewind yarn, a tape yarn, and that color is pretty exclusive to this particular yarn. So if you like the look of that and the color of that, and you want to follow that pattern and you want to make that hat in that size, that yarn is going to be the way to go. You're not going to really be able to see that hat and go, I want to use this yarn. It's going to be completely different. The different weight, the different size of yarn is going to do completely different things. This tape yarn let's just say this tape yarn right here, I think it's a 5. This right here is a 3, right? So already you're like, no, that's a huge difference. That's a huge difference because this yarn has some sturdiness and some stability. So when you're crocheting with it, it creates a fabric that's going to stiffen. This is not ever going to stiffen. This is not ever, I cannot adjust this yarn enough. Even if I tripled it up, even if I would have to crochet this yarn with this yarn together for me to see this color, but it looked like that. And even then it would be completely different. So when you play with when you substitute too much, sometimes you can completely use the size you're going for, the fabric or the texture that is really shown in the project, or you're going to lose the fabric feel. Now, sometimes we see things like a sweater, and we say things like drape. Now, drape is like, what does the fabric do? Now, this fabric, you can see like it's got some drape to it. You see how it's like scrunchy and, it's very flexible and there's a lot of fluidity in this. This has a lot of drape to it. Now, let's say I wanted to make this in rewind tape yarn. It's not going to have drape. It is going to be stiff and it's going to look like I'm wearing a paper bag. So it's not going to do the same thing. So, Angelica, I'm saying all of that to say that you can't always substitute a completely different weight because it depends on the fabric you're trying to create and the size you want. So if size is essential, you'd have to make a lot of different accommodations to use a different weight and make the same size. A lot of accommodations. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying you're reinventing the wheel in some way. So think about those things. And then as you go to substitute, you're able to substitute to create a size and a fabric that's going to make sense. So hopefully that helps. Let's see. Maribel, thank you for sharing. I need to remember this and check Ravelry more often. It's a great resource. It's free, and it's been around so long that there are so many resources here that it's just a great starting point to see, what's on the market, what are people doing with it, and just to get as much information as possible. Because you still may be unsure. Like I was still unsure when I was putting this together. I was like, I've used these yarns. I think they're going to work well, but I won't really know until I actually start crocheting it up. And that's when I saw, after seeing those 2 yarns, even after I did all of that legwork, I was like, okay, I can clearly see which one's going to work better. So I hope it helps for you too. Let's see. Bobby is here. Hello, Bobby. Good to see you. Amy McKeever is here. Good to see you too. Angelica's here. Thank you for being here. All right, guys. So that's it. So great question to Lisa. Hopefully I answered it in a way that that you can kind of adopt some of the same practices that I have. I mean, it's such a broader question. There isn't really like one answer in terms of how I do everything, because there's a different process for how I do things. If I'm making something brand new, I have to do a lot of legwork in terms of like, what's the fabric I want to create? What size do I want to create? What colors do I want? So there's a lot of legwork in that direction. And if I want to do something different, oh, where was it? Where was that picture? If I want to do something different, I mean, here's a very good example of there was a pattern that I made in a completely different yarn. So here I am, I'm following a pattern, but I want to substitute and use a different yarn. The blue market tote, I was like, ooh, I can't wait to make that again. Well, that yarn's discontinued. And, also I want to use something different. I can't get that yarn anymore. So this is a great example of how I substituted to, use something else, but give me the same look. Now, what I like about the blue market tote is that the yarn that I originally used, it was a chainette construction. So I really liked that. It gave me some durability, but also a lot of flexibility. I wanted to use something that was going to stretch and grow, but also kind of, like suck back in, right? So I didn't want something that was just going to, stretch and then not, regain its shape in any kind of way. I wanted something that, was going to be durable, even if I put wet things in or something like that. So I really wanted the fabric to hold up. So that's why I use Lazy Days for it. It really checked a lot of those boxes for me, and it allowed me to make a bag that looks a lot like the original bag, and it still functioned in all the ways that I needed it to. And, size wasn't going to be crucial. So while this yarn may have been in the same weight category-ish, if it's plus or minus, in size from the original, totally fine. So that's where that's coming from. Bobby, yay, my tote is famous now. Yeah. All right, everybody, that's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully this was helpful. Let's make this a bigger conversation. Let's keep going with this. So, if you guys have any questions about substituting yarn, or maybe you have a yarn in your stash and you just want to see what the possibilities are, the capabilities are, the characteristics, look it up on Ravelry and, look at some of those checkpoints that I showed you guys here and see what it's capable of, see what it's possible. What its possibilities are. And, maybe you'll dig a yarn out that you had no idea what to do with, and maybe you'll find a coordinating pattern that you can't wait to get started. So, maybe it'll kind of reignite something, or at least give you some additional information, so that way you can make things that you really love and you feel you're using the yarns and the fibers and the weights in ways that they're best suited for. Thank you for being here. Hello, Kathy. Happy I caught alive. Thank you, Salena. Learned so much. My pleasure. All right, guys, you know the drill. If you enjoyed this, if you thought it was helpful, if you learned something, tag a friend in the comments, especially if you think this will be helpful for them as well. Or do me a solid, share this in a place where you enjoy crochet if you think they'll enjoy it too. And again, keep the conversation going. So questions, comments, feedbacks in this realm, go ahead and drop it as soon as I see your comment. I'll get right back to you. Okay? Peace, love, crochet, everybody. See you later. Bye-bye.